who joins us right now. Danny, welcome to the program. Great to see you, my friend.
Thanks, Tom. Good to see you.
One of our viewers made the comment, it says this is a big weekend for UC basketball. They have two of the top 60 recruits in the country on campus this weekend. Obviously, you do the UC Bearcats football and basketball. Just to have guys like that come to your campus in just year two of Wes Miller has got to be a really good sign, I would think, right?
Absolutely. So Arrington Page, a 6'9" big man from Georgia, and Jizzle James, son of Edgerrin James, are the two players that viewer is talking about. They are both here this weekend. They are both four-star recruits. Cincinnati is also in the mix for the number one recruit in the country, point guard Isaiah Collier. So Wes Miller and his staff are taking big swings. It seems to me they're bound to get some of these guys. If they get any of them, it's a coup. If they get multiple guys, they're going to be able to contend in the Big 12 right away. So kudos to Wes Miller and his staff. They are in the mix with some of the best players in the country.
Dan, it used to be, I don't know if it's this way anymore, and maybe I'm throwing you on the spot. Maybe you don't know this. I bet you do know the answer. But it used to be you were only allowed as a high school senior. I mean, you can start visiting when you're a junior, but you're only allowed as a high school senior 5 official visits. Is that still accurate, or is that still the rule?
I don't know if that's the number, Tom. There is a limit on official visits. Now, Arrington Page, who's here this weekend, it is his official visit, but he visited over the summer. So some of these guys, depending on where their AAU teams are traveling or the relationships that they have with the coaches or, their own family's income, will make multiple visits to a school. And like I said, that's the case with Arrington Page.
Okay. All right, let's shift gears now to the UC Bearcats football team. You'll be at sold-out Nippert Stadium tomorrow. Indiana coming into town. Heard some of the comments made by Luke Fickell the other day. He really felt, Dan, or at least he said he really felt, that the ability to go beat Indiana at Indiana last year before they went to Notre Dame and beat Notre Dame in arguably the biggest regular season win in program history, that propelled them to higher heights last season. What kind of team is he looking at facing Indiana here in 2022?
One that looks a lot better from the team that Cincinnati beat last year. You may remember last year, Tom, Indiana started the season in the top 25. Expectations were really high going into that. The Bears won the game going away, and Indiana only won one more game the rest of the year, and it was against Western Kentucky. They were 2-10 last year. They were 0-9 in the Big Ten, and they're 3-0 this year. They lost their quarterback, Michael Penix, who transferred to Washington. He's been crushing it for the Huskies. I believe he's second in the country in passing yards so far this year. So what did Indiana do? They loaded up on the transfers, and they got a lot of good ones, including their quarterback who's starting, Connor Bazelak. He's from Dayton, went to Bishop Alter High School, started the last 2 years for Missouri, so he's got SEC experience, and he's averaging about 300 passing yards a game. Their top running back is an Auburn transfer. Their number 2 running back is a North Carolina transfer. They've got a couple of Ole Miss transfers on defense. So they seem to have had kind of a net plus year in the transfer portal.
So from a philosophy standpoint, it sounds like they have some guys more than capable of running the ball, a quarterback with experience who's capable of throwing the ball. Is that kind of their, MO is to try to balance that out? Or is there something that you think they believe they're able to exploit against the Cincinnati defense that we might see something more of one or the other?
It's a passing team, Tom. Statistically, they do have some decent running numbers, but this is a team where the offense is going to look like what UCF has done in recent years. So Bearcat fans are used to seeing this. The wide receivers are going to be spread out as wide as you can go on the field. They are going to have guys outside the numbers on both sides of the field. They like to take deep shots to stretch the field, to force you to defend every bit of grass, as coaches like to say. Their quarterback, Bazelak, is averaging more than 50 drops per game. He's not averaging more than 50 attempts because there have been some scrambles and some sacks. but he's looking to throw more than 50 times a game in their first 3 games of the season.
I like that coach at Indiana. I think he's done a nice job. I still can't for the life of me, and I don't know the backstory or the inside story. I think it's a shame. The Penix kid got hurt and ends up leaving. As you said, he's off to a great start at Washington. They had a huge win last week, just hammered Michigan State. And so, good for him, I guess. As far as UC is concerned, the Miami game, and I was listening to you on the radio, driving a lot around town that day. It didn't start so well. Couple of fumbles by Montgomery there. And I want to talk specifically, and this isn't to beat that kid up at all. But you and I have talked about this before. That's a crowded running back room with some very, very talented players there. And players that want to become the main guy. And Luke Fickell likes having, at least in the past, a main guy. How forgiving is Luke Fickell for a running back who coughs it up twice in the first half of a game?
Not very. I don't think many coaches are forgiving when guys are fumbling the ball, and that's been a problem for UC. They fumbled 9 times already in the first 3 games of the year. Now, they haven't lost all of them. Only 4 have been recovered by the other team. But there's some good luck involved when you are, falling on an oblong ball that's bouncing in all directions. So that is a big thing that Cincinnati has to fix. In last week's game, they did have a featured running back, really for the first time this year. Chuck McClellan carried 18 times. He topped the 100-yard rushing mark, but an injury helped explain that. Corey Kiner, I guess, cut his finger badly enough during the course of the game that they were a little bit worried about his ball security, so that cut down on his carries last week. I would expect that to be more of an even mix tomorrow against IU.
Do you think that, and look, I know you don't have a crystal ball. You say Indiana is better. And any of us would be foolish to say that UC is better right now than they were last year. That would just be ludicrous to say. But as you're watching this UC team, and we talked about chances they missed in the opener to beat Arkansas, they could have won that game. And they'd be sitting probably in the top 15 in the country right now had they won that game, maybe even better than that. Do you sense when you look at different areas of the team, and it's only 3 games in, do you sense this team is starting to gain a little identity, a little momentum, confidence, whatever the word is, that they're going to get this thing going?
I do. I don't think they're going to be as good as last year's team. Last year's team was the best team in school history and made history by going to the 4-team playoff. But this team can very realistically go back to a New Year's Six bowl game like they did 2 years ago when they faced Georgia in the Peach Bowl. I think that would be an incredible accomplishment after 9 guys left in the NFL draft. And I do think that's realistic. The best team outside of the Power Five gets one of those bids to a so-called New Year's Six bowl game. I think a lot of people thought that BYU was going to be the favorite, maybe outside of the Power Five, to claim that spot, and they've got a loss. So Cincinnati, despite having a loss, is right in that mix. And I don't see any reason, with the way that this team has started to perform and with the guys on the roster, that there's not a realistic chance that they can't run the table for the rest of the way on.
Okay, now we shift gears quickly to the other team you broadcast here in town, that being the Cincinnati Bengals. Really disappointing game again last week. And now you come this week. And now you're really starting to hear that term, must win. Is this a must win in week 3 of a 17-game schedule?
History tells you that it is. Very few teams in NFL history have overcome 0-3 starts to make the playoffs. I don't think any have overcome an 0-3 start to make the Super Bowl. The most recent team to start 0-3 and make the postseason was Houston back in 2017. DJ Reader was on the team at the time. So if the Bengals somehow lose this week, I think he would be the guy to stand up in front of the rest of the group and say it is possible to come back. But let's face it, if you start 0-3, you are facing astronomical odds. So don't start 0-3. Go to the Jets. You're a favorite. The Jets are better, but I don't think they're good yet. The Bengals need to get out of their own way, play like they're capable of playing, get the offense untracked in the first half, and take care of business this Sunday. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
I know you're not the offensive coordinator. I know you're not the head coach, but you watch this team play literally every single play over the course of a season. From where you sit and visiting and talking with other people, what would be the thing, if there's one thing you would do to get this offense going?
I know a lot of emphasis is on the play calling and the play design, and there's certainly an element of truth to that. But to me, until the offensive line plays better, nothing else really matters. Those guys have to at least be league average, and they have been bad, as anybody can see through the first 2 weeks. It's not just the 13 sacks. Joe Mixon leads the NFL in carries and touches, but is way down on the list for rushing yards and scrimmage yards. Joe Mixon didn't get bad. Joe Burrow didn't get bad. The offensive line has to play better. You may be familiar with a series that Peyton Manning does on ESPN Plus called Details, where, Peyton Manning is the best at breaking this stuff down. I'm like surfing around on TV the other night, and I see Peyton Manning on Joe Burrow. And he did one of these segments last year, and I wondered, man, is this something new? Are we about to see 10 minutes worth of Peyton Manning breaking down Joe Burrow's struggles for the first 2 games of the season? So I clicked it on, and it was a repeat of the one that played last year. But I went ahead and watched it anyway. It's only like 10 to 15 minutes long. And what I found really interesting was that the whole thing was from a game against the 49ers last year that the Bengals lost, but Joe Burrow played well. And the 49ers played Tampa 2 in that game, or 2 deep zone defenses in that game, exactly what the Bengals are having so much trouble with so far this year. So it's not like the coaches don't know plays to beat it. It's not like Joe Burrow's not capable of making throws to beat it, but you do need some protection. You need some time. You need to have some semblance of a running game. And I think if they can get those things going this week against the Jets, they're going to be fine.
Yeah, I just wonder, and you're spot on that, Dan, about this whole Tampa 2 thing. And look, I used to sit around with guys like Brian Billick or Chris Spielman or whoever, and they'd start talking this Tampa 2, or talking about the A gap, and my eyes would spin around in the back of my head, because for the viewer or the listener, unless you're really going to be able to illustrate what that is, there are a lot of people that think they know football out there, and me included, and we really don't know that much about football. At least I can speak for myself when it comes to being able to tell you exactly what the Tampa 2 is. But you're right. It's been around long enough now where this isn't some great surprise to the Joe Burrows and the Zach Taylors and the Joe Mixons and everybody else on the planet. It all comes down to, and at the end of the day, I don't know if there's a more important word in the English language on any level or walk of life than execution. Are you executing? I don't mean to be executed, but execution in that, are you able to do what you're supposed to do or want to do when that moment in time comes? Are you executing? Fill in the blank. And right now, that strikes me as their number one problem.
No question. They are not executing, and it's top to bottom. It really starts with the offensive line, but even Joe Burrow, as great as he is, has not played well in the first couple of weeks. In week 1, obviously, he was turning it over way too much, 4 turnovers on the first 5 possessions of the season, including a pick 6. Last week, I thought that Joe uncharacteristically looked a little bit jumpy when the rush began to close in. It's understandable. He's been sacked 13 times. He got sacked 70 times, including the playoff games last year. That is bound to affect you. But one of his strengths throughout his career, going back to his LSU days, is the ability to sidestep a little bit in the pocket, inch up a little bit, move back a little bit. It's not always scrambling to create plays when the pressure's on. It's just maneuvering within the pocket and then delivering a throw. And I thought last week, the eyes dropped a little bit. He took off at the first sign of pressure. I don't think it's going to be an ongoing problem. Joe always things. but I did think that was a bit of an issue last week.
I agree with you 100%. And I think it's human nature, and we talked to Brian Billick about this, that I had asked him the question, do quarterbacks get gun-shy? Because, I mean, Dan, you're there. And just sitting around with my son and my dad last Sunday watching the game, I mean, when they're in shotgun, it seems like the second Burrow catches the ball, within a blink of an eye, there is somebody all over him. And then I'm sitting there watching last night the Cleveland Browns, and they were talking over and over about Jacoby Brissett getting the ball out in under 2.5 seconds, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if Burrow has had in 2 games 5, 7 times total of all the plays they've run. And Lord knows they've run a ton of offensive plays, more than the opposition in these 2 games. I don't know if he's had 5 or 7 plays where he had 2.5 seconds to throw the ball.
He has. I know what you're saying. It feels like he doesn't, but he has. And that's another area where you can see why the Bengals have struggled, because even when Joe has had a clean pocket, according to the people that, time these things and study these things, his passer rating isn't good. And in the past, when Joe Burrow has had a clean pocket, his numbers are astronomical. So I believe in Joe Burrow. We know he didn't get bad overnight. If, nobody is better suited to address his own weaknesses and fix them in a hurry than that guy is. So I'm confident he's going to be fine, but he does need to have better protection up front. Let's hope it starts this week. They're not facing Micah Parsons this week. They're not facing TJ Watt this week. The Jets have good depth on their defensive line. We know that Carl Lawson is capable of being a great pass rusher, but he is coming back from a torn Achilles. So I think this is a defensive line that the Bengals O-line should be better suited to handle. Let's hope so, because it's been kind of grim in the first 2 weeks.
Okay, so Danny, before we let you go, we always have to ask you your travel schedule, because I hearken back on these weekends and what it's like, and the nerves and the anxiety and getting uptight. So you've got a 3:30 kick tomorrow, right, at Nippert?
Correct.
Okay, and a 1 o'clock game in the Meadowlands on Sunday. I don't need to tell you, one of the worst places in the world to fly into. In any of those 3 airports. When are you leaving?
Well, here's the deal. I don't like to fly the morning of a 1 o'clock game under any circumstances. That really makes me nervous, like you were saying. But sometimes you have to do it.
Yep.
But I want, just in case, preferably on different airlines, just in case. So there's only one direct flight on Sunday morning to the New York area from Cincinnati. That's not going to cut it. So I'm doing a one-way car rental after the game tomorrow. I'm driving to Indianapolis. I'm staying at a hotel close to the airport. I'm taking a 6:30 flight direct to Newark on Sunday morning. I'm knocking on wood now. There are multiple backups just in case there's a problem with that flight. I'm confident it will all work out, but feel free to say a prayer for me just in case.
I will definitely do so. I share your pain. I remember I used to get so uptight that morning deal. Yeah, really uptight. So you're going to be all right, though. So safe travels. Godspeed ahead, my friend. Enjoy the great setting, the great weather, the atmosphere tomorrow at Nippert Stadium. And then hopefully you can bring back a first Bengals win when we check in next week.
Let's talk about 2 wins next week. That sounds good to me.
Amen. Amen. Dan Hoard, kind enough to join us. Danny, thank you for your time, and safe travels.
You bet, pal. Thank you.
Yeah.